Joss and she really hit it out of the park today. I suppose we're all a little excited. In the shadow of his inventive guitar playing, there was a perfectionist with musical choices that were as unique as his playing style. Jeff Beck was a brilliant guitarist who mixed blues, rock, jazz, and fusion into something completely new. He is considered as one of rock's best instrumentalists. He was also a man who researched other bands with an intensity that was almost like a scientific obsession. Really? I saw him a long time ago with John McLachlan. Only Love. I don't aware of any other drummer who does that. Yes. Welcome back to Offstage Tales. Today, we're going to look into the interesting life of Jeff Beck and the 6 bands that are said to have drained his creative energy. The London-born artist who wrote classics like Beck's Bolero and A Day in the Life was famed for his never-ending search for musical perfection, which led him to some surprisingly contentious inspirations. Beck is said to have told Guitar Player magazine in 1975 that every great guitarist is really just a great listener. How carefully you study what came before makes the difference between excellent and great. He did study, though, and sometimes it drove other musicians away and puzzled rock purists. From supposed fights at dinner parties to musical borrowings that aren't very obvious. Beck's associations with these bands show not only his own interests, but also bigger questions about how art changes over time. Some of these influences were well known and praised, while others were only talked about in recording studios and criticized. But all of them had an effect on the guitarist who changed what 6 strings could do. So get your Stratocaster ready and let's count down the 6 bands that drove Jeff Beck crazy. The names might surprise you, and the stories behind them will undoubtedly make you rethink everything you thought you knew about being a guitar hero. 6. The Ventures. Coming in at number 6 on our list is a name that might surprise you. The Ventures. Yes, Beck is said to have had a lot of regard for the surf rock instrumentalists, even though they didn't like vocal-driven rock music in the early 1960s. And as we became friends, we started to hang out. According to reports, Beck became interested after hearing Walk Don't Run on pirate radio in 1960. Chris Welch, a music journalist, says that Beck told his Yardbirds comrades, "These guys proved you don't need words to tell a story. When there is nowhere to hide, every note matters." The comment circulated around London's music industry faster than one of Beck's feedback tests, according to reports. Beck was drawn to the Ventures music, but also to what it stood for. The Ventures were having a lot of success with what Beck called pure guitar conversation, while British bands were obsessed with American blues and R&B vocals. Music that allowed the instrument talk without words getting in the way. Beck is said to have told Melody Maker in 1965 that instrumental music is honest, but insiders say that the phrase was directly inspired by the Ventures approach. You can't use brilliant language or enticing hooks to hide. The two groups never worked together or talked to each other in public, but at a recording session in 1967, witnesses say Beck spent the whole afternoon trying to duplicate the Ventures' characteristic reverb sound. He is said to have told his producer, "This is what guitar should sound like in wide open spaces." The Ventures didn't seem to know that Beck liked them, but their impact was clear. They stood for everything Beck cared about, whether they knew it or not. Technical accuracy over showmanship, melody over volume, and mastery of instruments over dependence on vocals. 5. Cream. The power trio Cream comes in at number 5. Eric Clapton, Jack Bruce, and Ginger Baker are all famous musicians. This musical connection is quite interesting since it involved 2 guitarists who appear like they should have been friends instead of convoluted rivals who respected each other but still had some conflict. In 1966, Beck took Clapton's position in the Yardbirds, which was just as Cream was starting to form. This was the first time their paths met in a meaningful way. He was more of a big band swing drummer, with all the chops and everything. Beck's old manager, Simon Napier Bell, says that Beck supposedly didn't like Cream's early work and said, "Eric has the volume, but he's missing the finesse. Power without accuracy is just noise." The criticism didn't get to Clapton directly, but it did make its way around London's close-knit music world. What made Beck's supposed attitude so interesting was how identical their methods were. Both were pushing blues rock into heavier areas and playing around with distortion and feedback. But Beck is said to have thought of Cream as raw force instead of surgical precision. In 1967, Beck told Beat Instrumental magazine, "Musical evolution requires subtlety, not just bigger amplifiers." Many people thought this was a criticism of Cream's wall of sound style, but there were other times when I grudgingly admired them. When Cream broke up in 1968, Beck is said to have told his bandmates Eric finally figured out when to stop. Beck later told Guitar World, "Kem taught me that sometimes you need to get loud to get quiet." For Beck, who valued technical ingenuity over raw power, Cream was both an inspiration and a warning. They were successful, but in Beck's mind, they may have limited him. 4. The Yardbirds. The Yardbirds, Beck's own band in its early days, takes the number 4 place. This interaction showed how Beck felt about what he thought was an inherited tradition via his own creativity. "I've made other music since the Arbest, but someone told me I should feel proud tonight." According to reports, Beck became interested in the Yardbirds with Eric Clapton on lead guitar about 1963. Beck is said to have watched Clapton's performance from the audience at a small London bar and told pals afterward, "That's exactly what I want to do, but better." The comment got back to Yardbirds management, who then thought of Beck as a possible successor. Chris Tree, a music journalist, says that Beck was especially interested in the Yardbirds' 1964 songs, which mixed blues with experimental feedback that sounded like Beck's own musical style. In a 1975 interview, Dree recalled that Beck had said, "They're doing what every guitarist dreams of, pushing blues into unknown territory." Beck's friendship with the band got stronger when he joined in 1965, taking Clapton's place when he left. Beck is said to have told Melody Maker that taking over was like getting a race vehicle that was already properly tuned. You appreciate what came before, but you want to see how quickly it can actually go. The obligation to follow Clapton's established sound while yet finding his own voice made Beck's feelings even more conflicted. During early practices, band members said they heard Beck play Clapton solos note for note before changing them into his own versions. Some foundations you build on, and some you tear down and rebuild. Beck is said to have informed a roadie around this time. The dynamic finally showed Beck's lifelong struggle between being original and being influenced by others. He respected musical tradition while pushing the limits that his predecessors had set but never completely explored. 3. King Crimson. King Crimson, the first progressive rock band, is now Beck's third most favorite band. After their innovative first album, In the Court of the Crimson King, they were open to this relationship with music, and that takes discipline. In 1969, Beck became interested in the band when their first album changed the way rock music sounded by making it more complicated and frightening. Rudy, a former member of Beck's band, said that when Beck first heard the album, he said, "They took all the safety out of rock music. Every chord change is like stepping off a cliff." Beck was especially interested in the fact that the band didn't follow traditional song forms. The Court of the Crimson King was made to be hard on purpose. Robert Fripp is said to have spent months developing time signatures that were hard even for experienced musicians to play. During rehearsals in 1970, Beck tried to memorize their songs, which puzzled and upset his own band members. Beck's fascination grew after he supposedly talked to members of Crimson about working together backstage in 1972. Peter Grant, Beck's old manager, says that Fripp graciously turned down the offer, saying, "Jeff's technique is impressive, but our music needs a different kind of math." Beck was so upset by the rejection that he spent the next year learning about music theory. The connection was a reflection of Beck's lifelong search for musical challenges that pushed him outside his blues rock comfort zone, even when such difficulties were practically impossible to master. 2. The Beatles. The group that came in second on our list is the one who topped the charts. The Beatles, whose innovative studio practices were said to be everything Beck found inspiring about pushing musical boundaries beyond what could be done live. I thought it could have been the Beatles when I heard it. I saw a bench with around 20 guitar players and their cases on it. The infatuation is said to have started around 1966, when the Beatles' album Revolver was at the top of the charts. Beck is said to have gone to a listening party in London where George Martin talked about how to make records. He stayed until 3 a.m. asking technical questions. A musician who knows Beck said that after the show, Beck allegedly said, "They're not just making songs anymore, they're making sonic buildings." Beck was especially interested in the group's new ways of making things. Beck told Guitar Player magazine in 1967 that guitars shouldn't sound like orchestras, but they somehow made it work. He didn't name the Beatles specifically, but he did say, "When you layer everything perfectly and use the studio as an instrument, what you get is pure imagination." The interest reached its peak in 1968 when both Beck and Beatles producer George Martin were working at Abbey Road at the same time. Beck had done his experimental Beck-Ola sessions there while Martin was wrapping up work on Beatles projects. Studio workers said that Beck kept asking engineers about how the Beatles recorded music, especially how they used reverse recordings and tape manipulation. Beck is said to have taught his Jeff Beck group that some musicians play music and others sculpted after looking into how the Beatles made their records. The best ones do both at the same time. Beck's longtime notion that technical innovation should support musical expression was reflected in the praise. He got this idea from watching the Beatles go from being a live band to being studio pioneers who changed what recorded music could do. The Shadows, a British instrumental band, are said to have won Beck's most passionate musical devotion. They are the band that took the crown. This fixation hurt Beck deeply because it was about the very core of what he thought guitar music should do: communicate melodies without any singing. People say that Beck's love of music started in 1960 when he was a teenager and heard Apache on Radio Luxembourg. Hank Marvin told Guitar World in a subsequent interview that Beck was obsessed with our tremolo technique. He also said that Jeff understood melody in ways that most rock guitarists never would. Tony Newman, who used to work for Beck on the road, says that these early Shadows records changed the way Beck wrote instrumental music. During Beck's time with the Yardbirds, when he started adding shadow-style melodic parts to blues rock songs, his devotion apparently grew. Many people thought that the instrumental parts where Beck stepped forward and played clear, reverb-drenched melodies were a direct tribute to Marvin's style. John Paul Jones, the bassist, recalled that Beck had said during a session, "Tonight they'll understand that guitars can sing without words. The most telling thing Beck said was when he was asked about the shadows in a rare interview in 1980. Beck is believed to have responded, "Hank is technically brilliant, sure. But more significantly, he taught me that every note should have a meaning. Has any other guitarist made music that both your granny and your girlfriend like? Music should not only show, but also tell." That's all there is to it. Jeff Beck's 6 most surprised band loves, from surf pioneers to the prog masters. What influence startled you the most? Let us know what you think in the comments. If you want to learn more about guitar legends' hidden musical mysteries, hit that like button and subscribe.